We're joined by Eric Bates. He's the editor at New Republic. Eric, good morning.
Good morning.
What an extraordinary week. What do you think, in the end, the impact of the Comey firing is having on the White House at this point?
Well, I think it's, to begin with, a huge distraction. They have a big agenda. It's hard to concentrate on that when you've got all this other noise going on. I don't think it's cost him a lot of support among Republicans so far because they've had to circle the wagons. They don't have any choice. You know, they were all in on him at this point. But it is kind of metastasizing into a new narrative, and that could be really problematic.
Obviously, the idea that possibly there are secret recordings has grabbed the headlines, and there's been no further explanation. What do you make of this?
It's hard to know. I mean, Trump has a history of just making things up and throwing them out there. This from the guy who said he was being taped by Obama. So whether he threw that out there just as a hand grenade or not, but I do think Donald Trump is perhaps the only person in the world whose takeaway from Watergate could have been tape recordings. That's a good idea.
Meanwhile, where does the Russia investigation go at this point? I mean, you have a president who's clearly upset about the Russia investigation. He calls it a made-up story. But at the same time, the firing, in fact, casts more light on the whole story.
Sure. I mean, from that sense, the timing was horrible. I don't think Trump thinks in that way. He wasn't thinking, is this going to make it worse or better? But now the spotlight's really going to be on, is there any sort of interference, any sort of foot dragging on that? There's going to be so much more attention to it now than there was before. And investigation is there to answer the question, was anything done wrong? And that's got to happen in a way now that's just rigorous and thorough.
You mentioned before everything's sort of hanging out there, and obviously the investigation as well. President Trump heads to the Middle East for his first foreign visit. How does this follow him there?
I think his hope is that this is going to be a big distraction, that he's going to change the channel, that Trump in the Holy Land is somehow going to take over the narrative. But it doesn't feel to me like this one's going to go away in the way.
Does he really believe that we'll stop talking about the other things in the media and that suddenly the focus will all be on the Middle East?
I think one of the reasons he did the firing is because he, as an entertainer and as a reality show person, knows how to change the narrative. He thinks when it starts going the way you don't like, just shift the focus. So I think now whether this is going to be big enough for ratings-wise to shift the focus, we'll see.
Well, before the focus was shifted, we were talking about health care and the tax agenda. What does this mean for the president's agenda at this point?
Well, I think it makes it very hard, even though the Republicans have circled the wagons, it's going to make it harder and harder for them to get the job done on some of those big things where it really is going to come down to a few votes, where he needs to peel people off, where he needs people feeling comfortable that they can come with him. And comfort isn't exactly the word that we've had in the past week. I think it's going to make it very difficult for a lot of people to see him as an ally.
You know, you mentioned that he hasn't lost the support in some of that base. What needs to happen for that possibly to happen?
That's been the question from the beginning. I mean, everybody has thought that there's some political norm that Trump will violate that will be his undoing. And from the moment he came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and announcing his presidency, that has not been the case. So that's really the question. Is there any norm that he can violate, given that violating political norms is his entire brand?
Eric Bates, thank you. We appreciate the insight.
Thanks for having me.